Here we are at the Metropolitan Museum of Art at the 17th century Spanish art gallery, looking at what many have deemed one of the most extraordinary portraits of all Western painting, Diego Velázquez's Juan de Pareja. While it is easy to call any one of Velázquez's many celebrated portraits extraordinary, this portrait of his enslaved assistant Juan de Pareja is particularly noteworthy. The painting's groundbreaking verisimilitude or likeness to truth and its portrayal of a man not typically depicted in portraiture tradition make it truly exceptional.
The Met clearly thought the painting was remarkable. When they acquired the painting in 1970, they paid a record-breaking $5.5 million for it. They said that it was their historic duty to acquire what they saw as one of the most beautiful, most living portraits ever painted.
And it wasn't only this painting that Velázquez made in such a lifelike manner. Velázquez had a great ability for conveying truth in his paintings, which is perhaps why he was so sought after for portraiture in his time. In 1623, Velázquez became the official court painter to King Philip IV. Ruling Spain from 1621 until his death in 1665, Philip IV was a generous patron of the arts and a big supporter of Velázquez. Unlike many rulers who were depicted forgivingly, Philip was painted more realistically by Velázquez. His aging over time is carefully described in Velázquez's numerous portraits, one of which is on view in the same gallery as Juan de Pareja. Beyond his official job of painting exceptionally realistic portraits of the king and the royal family for posterity, Velázquez was allowed a great deal of freedom to buy art for the royal collection and to travel to Italy to further his practice.
And it was actually on one of these trips to Italy that Velázquez painted and presented the Juan de Pareja portrait. On his second trip that lasted from 1649 to 1651, Velázquez had been granted permission to paint the portrait of Pope Innocent X in Rome. As he would only have a short time with the Pope, Velázquez prepared by painting the portrait of a man of a more humble status, his enslaved assistant, Juan de Pareja. Born in 1606, Pereira was the son of an enslaved Moorish woman and a white Spanish man. He had been working for Velázquez after he had been inherited or purchased in the 1630s and was brought to Italy to accompany his master. There is some contention as to whether or not the portrait had been painted to bolster Pereira's status, but there is insufficient evidence to support this. The portrait was most likely done as a practice and to display Velázquez's skill in Rome.
Unlike many of the commissions in royal portraiture meant for private spaces, Juan de Pareja was publicly viewed at an exhibition at the Pantheon in Rome on March 19, 1650. Many painters and patrons from various countries showered praise on the painting and exclaimed how they couldn't tell the difference between the painting and the sitter. The writer Palomino even said that the other paintings in the show were just art, but that this one alone was truth.
At the time of its 1650 showing, the image of this nobly depicted, dark-skinned sitter alone would have been intriguing. But even today, walking into the Met Gallery where this and a few other Velázquez portraits live, the Pareja portrait demands your attention. The viewer is not just walking up to another record of a man long gone. They are meeting with Pareja himself. Free from the restrictions of commission portraiture, Velázquez focuses this personal painting on the sitter above all else. Placed in the typical three-quarter portraiture length in a muted non-space, Pareja does not need or have many attributes or symbols to describe him like one would usually see in royal portraiture. Nearly matching the neutral brown-gray background, he wears untidy clothes with a small rip in the elbow offset by a delicately articulated, bright white collar, most likely placed on Pareja for the making of the portrait. The subdued coloring allows for a striking contrast with the deep richness of his copper skin and his dark black hair. While Velázquez uses free brushwork as seen in the description of his clothes and his right hand, he is still precise and careful in his detail as seen by his minute corrections in the cloak and collar.
But Velázquez skillfully maintains a liveliness in Pareja. He paints a small pinpoint of light in his dark brown eyes, giving his radiant face and gaze a quiet intensity. He's looking at you as much as you are looking at him. Like what we see in royal portraiture, Pareja is depicted with the same kind of proudness and honor as he sits with stately posture and gazes directly at the viewer. Within the confines of the canvas, he is a dignified gentleman.
But there is a hint of sadness or sorrow within this dignity. His breath seems to be held with closed lips, and he remains reserved. There is no doubt that it was a rare honor that someone like Pareja would be able to see their exact likeness in that time, and to be portrayed with such a high nobility like that of a duke or pope. But there is still the reality that Pareja was an enslaved man without many rights. As a slave, he was not able to fully embrace his true passion of painting until after he received emancipation. It may seem as though Velásquez was against owning slaves with his eventual liberation of Pareja and with this noble portrait, but it was fairly typical for the Spanish to free slaves after years of service. Velásquez also was known to paint other marginal members of society, like court dwarfs and buffoons.
But there remains something exceptional in the portrait of Juan de Pareja, separating it from his depictions of court dwarfs and buffoons. Velásquez paints a man who is seen as less than human with an extremely high level of humanity, and uses a genre reserved for nobility to do it. By capturing Pareja's likeness through both his physiognomy and spirit, Velásquez truly demonstrates the epitome of great portraiture. He goes beyond recording simply a person's appearance and instead offers a palpable description of their presence and who they were.